Hello there. Star Trek is not always known for its grandiose battles and its action-packed sequences. It's not that they're not there, but there sometimes is a reason for it. Sometimes they're not there. But we're going to cover the movies. I want to go through a list. We're going to break down the biggest, baddest battle sequences in the Star Trek movies. I'm going to rank them. Now, to be clear, the foundations of this are my personal opinion. You're entitled to have a different one, and I encourage you to tell me in the comments below how wrong I am. Where you think what should be at number one, what should have been last, what was good, what was bad, and how you disagree with my particular choices. Feel free, go nuts. With that said, the only other criteria is basically what I felt was on a spectacle level, what was most impressive, and what I felt had the most impact on the setting. So with that out of the way, let's get started with the number 13 spot. The unluckiest movie on this list is Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home. And the reason why this movie has what I think is the worst combat sequences in any of the Star Trek movies is because there isn't one. There's no battle in this film. There's a bit of punching, but other than that, there's nothing in this movie. I mean, Spock knocks somebody out on a bus, which I genuinely gave consideration to being the best battle sequence in this movie. Realistically, it's the cetacean probe coming to Earth and knocking everything out. It's a spectacular scene, it's beautiful, it's well shot, but it's hardly a battle, it's very one-sided, it's not interesting. So moving on. Star Trek V: The Final Frontier has, again, very few battle sequences. It is a step up from the previous one. It has at least one actual fight scene, if you don't include the battle with God at the end. God. That's a bad film. Pun intended. This sequence was obviously against the Enterprise by a Klingon bird of prey. It's not particularly spectacular. It's a little underwhelming. And it's most of them trying to shoot a shuttle. So moving on. Star Trek: The Motion Picture, the first movie. Now, this film has a reputation for being slow and plodding, and it's a good reputation. It's earned it. It is a good film, but it's a thinking man's movie. It's a thought-provoking film. It's a visual spectacle, but it is by no means an action-packed movie. But it does have an actual battle sequence at the beginning, where 3 Klingon Katinga-class battle cruisers attempt to engage V'Ger very unsuccessfully. It's the only fight in the sea in the entire movie, but it is a fight. Next, we've got Star Trek Generations. The reason this one's a little lower, because the fight scene in this isn't terrible, its impact on the setting arguments. I did a video previously about Riker's tactics. Just because the bird of prey, this old rickety bird of prey, could penetrate the Enterprise's shields. The Enterprise fired once. It had more than enough firepower. We've seen it happen, where with overwhelming force, the Enterprise could cripple a Borg cube. A Klingon bird of prey should have been cut a hot knife through butter to the Enterprise. It shouldn't have mattered. Yeah, it could fire a few torpedoes and disruptors through the shields, most of which it missed when it was firing. The Enterprise can take those hits. It could have destroyed the bird of prey before it was able to launch enough of its weapons to do any significant damage. Also, they reused the sequence from Star Trek VI and the destruction of the bird of prey, so that knocked it down a notch for me. Next, Star Trek III: The Search for Spock, a slightly better battle sequence. It was a toss-up between, do I do the actual fight sequence on the ground, but then I thought, no, I'm going to stick this into space. The Enterprise A, of course, is destroyed in this movie, not as a direct result of this combat, but nonetheless. The battle sequence between the bird of prey and the Grissom is hardly a battle sequence, but the Enterprise and the bird of prey do have a fairly decent, short battle sequence, which the Enterprise would clearly have won if it was actually operating with a crew and wasn't broken. Next, Star Trek Beyond, the third movie in the JJ verse, which saw the Enterprise cut to pieces by swarm fighters launched by Krell. I mean, I considered the end battle at Yorktown for this, but it's Beastie Boys. They defeat them with music, so I ignored that one, and they fight the Enterprise. Seeing the Enterprise cut to pieces is very impressive. The sequence is very, again, visually impressive, but overall it has very little impact on the setting aside from destroying the Enterprise, and I can never warm to this movie, so it stays sort of middling. It's sort of lukewarm, but we're getting better. Star Trek Insurrection is in the next spot. The battle of the Briar Patch. This again gives us the Riker maneuver, and again this was listed in one of my previous videos about Riker's battle tactics between Generations and Insurrection, that if the Riker from Insurrection had been in command of the Enterprise during Generations, that battle would have gone very different and the Enterprise D might not have been destroyed. And this sequence is actually very good. And in what is considered generally a lackluster movie, I think is a fair assessment. The Baku things are all what the hell. But this fight with the Son'a is actually pretty cool. And the Son'a battleships are one of my favourite starship designs in Star Trek. The Son'a are by no means my favourite race. I don't find them very interesting. F. Murray Abraham does a brilliant job. But they're not given a lot to do. And there's a lot of flaws in this movie. But this fight sequence is not one of them. And it is pretty damn good. Next, Star Trek 2009. This actually, as you know, J.J. Abrams is more a Star Wars director. We're feeling the Star Wars in this movie. There's loads to choose from. I picked the opening battle because it was, again, spectacular. It hooks you instantly, even with all the lens flare. The battle against the Narada between the USS Kelvin and the Narada is a brilliant scene. It's also the emotional impact of James Tiberius Kirk being born at the exact moment that the ship is torn apart, as his dad, George Kirk, sacrifices himself by ramming the ship into the Narada to ensure the safety of the crew and his own child's survival. The emotional impact of that scene alone, and again, the impact on the setting within that particular timeline, is very significant. And again, the battle is very well done. The Kelvin's an odd ship, it's too big, but it's an interesting vessel. The weapons and tactics used by both sides are quite interesting. It's quite interesting to see basically a Romulan mining ship from the 100 years in the future. I know the whole Borg enhanced technology systems, but effectively it's still not a warship, not truly. Was able to rip through a Federation starship from 100 years in the past simply because of probably the technological difference. Is pretty cool. Next, Star Trek Into Darkness. I have very mixed feelings about this movie, as I'm sure you will. Tell me in the comments, you know, Khan, just that. But the battle between the USS Vengeance and the USS Enterprise is a pretty damn good one. And I don't know, I just love the Vengeance, and it's my list. I like that ship. I'm sorry, I know the film is just tragic, but the Vengeance itself is a very interesting concept. It's an odd starship again, as are many of the ships in the JJ continuity, but the battle sequence between these vessels is very good. With Admiral Marcus Orkan in command of it, the ship kicks ass, and it was never used to its full potential, and that was kind of sad. We're getting into the home run stage here. We've got Star Trek First Contact. This battle sequence, many of you may have been thinking, would have been my number one. It is an excellent battle scene. You see the Defiant, as well as a fleet of other Federation warships, effectively, because the Akira class, the Saber class, those are all combat-orientated vessels. They're not ships of exploration. They're a next generation of starship built to fight the Borg and the Dominion. They're ships given teeth and claws. These ships are claws out first, and we'll talk about it later. They're the opposite way round. The whole sequence is very, very well done. It's cool to see the Defiant in big screen. The battle sequence originally was meant to be much bigger, more starships, particularly the Borg. There were meant to be multiple cubes attacking Earth and actually showing Starfleet destroying a few of them, but for pacing and for mainly budget, that was all scrapped and this battle was scaled down, which is a shame. It's a damn shame, but because that would have made this number one instantly. Next, Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country. A Klingon quoting Shakespeare while attacking the Enterprise and the USS Excelsior. I know it's cliched, but who doesn't love it? That was an excellent scene, and Chang is a very memorable villain. His Bird of Prey, again, was an amazingly advanced and powerful ship. Very, very cool concept, being able to fire through its cloaking device. It was nearly able to waste two of Starfleet's most powerful ships, simply because they couldn't see it. And having to use intelligence and patience to outwit your enemy. This wasn't. This was more like a game of 3D chess in space, rather than a game of who's got the biggest gun, like with say the Vengeance or some of the other previous battles mentioned. It was who's going to outsmart who, because Chang knew his ship couldn't take many hits or any hits from these ships. If they were hit once, they were effed hard up the tailpipe. And they knew it. And Kirk knew it. And so did Sulu. They had to find that ship. But they also knew that because they couldn't find it, he was going to peck them to death. It was a very cool scene, kind of tense. And again, it's the last hurrah of the Enterprise crew. It was the decommissioning of the Enterprise A after this. And impact, again, the setting is emotion. Next, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. This film is a masterclass in how to do it right. Often regarded on many people's lists as ranking as the highest of the Star Trek movies, one of the finest made. It's considered one of the most accessible to non-Star Trek fans. It brings back a character and finishes off a story which was started 15 years earlier from when it was made. It introduces a whole new class of starship. The film itself, we're not going to get into, but it is genuinely one of the best made Star Trek movies. But the battle scene, the Battle of the Mutara Nebula, it's a smart battle. Also, the only time the Enterprise fires its phasers in any of the Star Trek movies. Random piece of trivia there for you. But it's tense. It's more like submarine warfare. It's Das Boot in space. It's hunting each other. They can't see. They're both blind and defenseless, but their weapons still work. And they're looking for each other. Each one knows they're not going to leave the other one alive. The other one is too dangerous, too much of a threat to the other. So they're not leaving this battle. One of them is going to die, and you know it. And it's, again, this slow-paced burn. And it has one of the most satisfying conclusions of any battle. It's the beginning of the so-called Star Trek trilogy of movies. It's so well made, so well paced, and so put together that you can't say that this scene is not a masterclass. Also, we've got the proper Khan in this film. Now for the number one spot, and I know this one will probably annoy some purist Trekkies. Star Trek Nemesis. The battle between the Scimitar, the Enterprise E, and two Romulan Valdor-class warbirds may not be most people's first choice, but hear me out. That film is underrated. Star Trek Nemesis is actually a pretty good film. It's just a lot of people don't like it. Now, there are many good reasons for it. It's made by a guy who doesn't know Trek. The actors didn't have a good time on set. There are many elements to it that don't make a lot of sense. But you've got the original Next Generation cast. You've got Tom Hardy, yes, before he was famous. He does a fantastic job. You've got Ron Perlman. The Romulans are the villain, properly, for a change, kind of. And I mean that as a change, because most of the movies, it's usually the Klingons. I mean, the Klingons are pretty much the only race that are in every single Star Trek movie. And this time we switch it up. The Scimitar is, again, probably an alien point of view, from an alien ship, maybe my favourite alien ship. Absolutely, hands down, it's one of my favourites. It's a magnificent looking vessel, and its capabilities are mind-boggling. It has a weapon that can destroy all life on a planet, but leave all the buildings and infrastructure completely intact. It can fire through its cloak. It's more heavily armed than practically anything else in the setting, and it was able to, without a lot of difficulty, destroy two Romulan warbirds and disable the Enterprise. If it had been choosing to, and actually trying to destroy the Enterprise, it would have done so. Bear in mind they were trying to disable it. Again, we've got shades of Star Trek VI here, the battle with Chang, with the firing through the cloak and the sort of trying to find each other. You've also got shades of Star Trek II, with the whole, you're kind of blind and you're trying to find each other, but no one's leaving this scenario alive, basically idea. And you've got my enemy's enemy is my friend. You've got Commander Denatra commanding the Romulan, commanding the Valdor. So it's all put together so well, and it's surprisingly a good scene. And the film isn't as bad as you probably remember. It's not as good as some of the other films, but it's certainly better than we remember. It's definitely better than Insurrection. But there we have it. There's my list. And bear in mind, it is just my list. If you disagree, I want to hear about it. Put it in the comments below. These are my picks for the best fight sequences in all of the 13 currently made Star Trek movies, not including TV series. And obviously it's not every battle in every film, because some of them, particularly Star Trek 2009, have multiple battle sequences I got to choose from. I just picked my favourite. And if you have a different one that's either not on this list, one of the other battles from the settings, or one of the other fights in the movies, by all means, again, comment it down below. And with that said, we're at the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please like, share, and subscribe. Hit the bell notification icon, because that is the real subscribe button if you want to stay up to date with the videos coming up from this channel. And with that said, thank you for watching. Bye-bye. I'd just like to say a thank you to everyone for watching that video. I hope you enjoyed it. I really enjoy making these. If you did enjoy it, please consider giving a like, share, and a subscribe, and maybe checking out the other videos on the screen right now. And in the description box below, there are links to my other social media accounts.